The time of your life, the time of your life. At the time I was working in the studio, making up calypsos about topical news. But whether I can still do it, I don't know. Now the audience all know the date in here, so see if you at home can work out the year. Now I'm going to make up verses about various topical items that happened in this year we know about, so see if anyone can put a hand up and... yes?
New Labour Party leader.
New Labour Party leader. I've got to think quick on that one, right? In February, Harold Wilson was picked, and from then on he never looked back. We got Mary's verse, what was even worse, that ruddy pipe and the Gamex Smack. That ruddy pipe and the Gamex Smack. Give me another one.
The Perfumer Affair.
The Profumo Affair. I thought that might come up. That gives you a clue to the year. Mr. Profumo was, Profumo, I think, was War Minister. He resigned, but I think I should say this, that the people who were really having the affair were Christine Keeler and Mandy Rice Davis. Christine Keeler and Mandy Rice. There's another one. Yeah.
The Beaching Railway cuts.
The Beaching Railway cuts. Oh yes, Beaching announced he was going to lose lots of stations and jobs would be nicked, which he did. But the biggest cut was when the great train robbers nicked £2.5 million. They nicked 2.5 million. Time for one more.
Yeah, what about the FA Cup final?
Have you got a ticket? Right, the memory man now is the FA Cup final. In May, Manchester United, they came to Wembley, and certainly without pity, because they knocked 6 bells and also the stuffing out of poor old Leicester City. At the time poor Noel was just a baby, it was May the 25th, 1963. Did you get the year 1963? Yes, it was 1963. Thank you.
Very good. Very, very good. Well done. Where and when did you decide that that was the artistry for you?
I'm making up calypsos. Well, I went into a nightclub, first of all, in England many years ago, and there was a raid on this club. It was nothing very serious. It was drinking after hours. And there was a West Indian calypso singer who was making up calypsos about the policeman as he was being searched. And I thought that was a very funny idea, so I picked it up from there.
Ever been totally stumped when someone has shouted a suggestion?
Oh, yes. The thing is to try and ignore them. But actually, it works sometimes when you completely fail,
yeah,
because it proves that you're really doing it rather than a false, phony thing. You know?
Yeah. OK, you've mentioned May 1963.
That's it.
A very, very special occasion for a young man, my special guest on Time of Your Life this week, because it was his 17th birthday. He had just signed with a professional football club, a club which went all the way to Wembley. It was the big year for Manchester United.
United's captain, Noel Cantwell, leads his men up to the Royal Box. For them all, it's the fulfilment of an English footballer's ambition, the cup and a cup medal.
And there, admiring the return of the cup to Manchester United, my special guest tonight, ladies and gentlemen, George Best. Lance Percival set the scene rather nicely, May 1963, but why was it the time of your life?
Well, the thing was, I'd been in Manchester since I was 15, as you know, I'd left home in Belfast, and I'd gone through a sort of an apprenticeship period. I'd just had my 17th birthday, and that's when you know, the club usually decide whether to sign a player full-time professional. Of course, leading up to the cup final, they obviously had other things in their mind. So at the time, I didn't really know whether I was going to stay at Manchester United or whether I was going to go home to Belfast.
And of course, it was a very important time for Manchester United, who was still getting over the effects of Munich.
Yeah, it was really. It was the start of some great years. The air crash obviously had taken away some tremendously great players from a great club side. And Manchester United had become, in those days, if they weren't your team or the team that you supported, they were everyone's sort of second favourite team. And this really was the start of some tremendous years for them. So it was very important to win this trophy.
And we have with us this evening two members of that victorious Manchester United team, Pat Crerand and the captain, Noel Cantwell. Well, he's already been honest and said that probably the guys at Manchester United had a lot more on their minds than George Best. Do you remember anything of him at that time?
I do. I remember him as a thin, spindly sort of a guy who had exceptional ability and just a bit too young to appear in the cup final, but I think most of us appreciated that he had exceptional skill and he was going to be a great player, but he was just about probably 6 months too early for it to play in our game. But he was only a kid. He drank lemonade and he behaved himself. He behaved himself.
He did
so
what?
well. Yeah, that's right. Probably orange squash and various things I remember seeing him at the weekend. But at Manchester United, Noel, at the time, particularly the young players, they were sort of held down by Matt and they were all together and we were the senior players at the time. But he soon emerged as somebody we were all very excited about.
Pat, were you aware of this emergence?
Yeah, well, as I say, we all were, because his ability was, I mean, unbelievable at that time. And for a young boy, and, you know, but what I remember about the cup final, in actual fact, coming back from the game and him and John Fitzpatrick up at the window, but I remember one thing about it, because when the kids used to mix with the players, then Matt would maybe take one or two of them away somewhere, and, you know, you get the kids round the table. Probably they'd never been in a big hotel in your life, and I remember asking them one day, do you want a prawn cocktail? No, we don't drink.
George was quite a shy guy at the time. I don't think that many players, many people at the club, there were quite a lot of good, exciting young players there. And the thing he had more than anybody else, he had exceptional ability. But it takes more than just ability to be a great player. And I wasn't sure, there's a question mark until people emerge and play in the first team. I've seen some great individual players with ability and never make it.
Yeah.
So I think we were looking forward to him getting in the team, and as soon as he got in, I don't think he ever was left out of the team other than when he ran away or something like that.
We might care to comment about some of the skills that we'll show you now.
And Best. Oh, beautiful football. This man is a genius. Best just with foul, but it into the goal. And he's got a clear chance. And that's running.
Best is accepted by worshipping fans and professional experts alike as the most lavishly gifted player in Europe, if not in the world. So identifying with him requires rather a lot of imagination. His game is an amalgam of superb, almost unnatural balance, unbreakable spirit, a delicacy of touch that stays true no matter how fast he moves, limitless ingenuity and ambition, and force out of all proportion to his physique. He carries onto the field a constant threat of the incredible.
Having seen that, I mean, the skills are obvious, but from the professional's point of view, what was so special about him?
Well, I think it was his ability and his balance, and one didn't ever realise whether George was a right-footed player, left-footed player. And there's not many players in the world that you cannot identify, and he could drop his shoulder and go both ways. And another thing one doesn't recognise when you're 16 is whether you're brave enough. And we've all seen him, and again, he's one of the bravest players which people wouldn't even recognise. And I think his nerve was another thing, that, you know, the bigger the game, that he's just a calmer. And as a kid, as a young kid, when he played in cup ties and things like this, he was under pressure, he was a great player.
I really never got nervous before the games. I think because you know, the lads will tell you, I mean, 10, 15 minutes before the games most of the time, they had to come looking for me. I used to be with my friends outside having a cup of tea.
I remember the first game he ever played in the first team in actual fact was against West Bromwich Albion at Old Trafford. And he played against a lad called Graham Williams, who was a big, strong left back, but a good footballer who played for Wales. After Matt had told me, we were saying, this Stuart Williams is a big fella, and if he comes near, he'll kick this out, you know. We tried to, but we didn't frighten him. It didn't make any difference to him at all at that time.
Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. And some of the other events of May 1963, there were some very interesting fashions. Yes. It was quite an interesting time, actually, because the 50s and the very smart styles were sort of battling with the beginnings of the swinging 60s. People were trying to get more casual, and men were growing their hair a bit longer, including you. Did you ever bouffon your hair? Ever sort of put it up at all?
No.
No, well,
no.
there was quite a movement at that time to keep the bouffant.
The hairdressing exhibition at Alexandra Palace created something of a wave of interest here and overseas. There were plenty of experts demonstrating their skill and quite remarkable creative ability. Anyway, they're all set to go places. I wonder which of them will go for him.
Actually, I thought there were certain similarities there with today's punk styles. And in fact, in May 1963, ladies' hair fashions were causing a degree of trouble.
Walk out over curlers ban. These 4 teenagers walked out of their jobs yesterday because the boss banned them from wearing hair curlers at work. 18-year-old Irene Dodd of Micklefield said, "It's all right for someone who's married. I'm still looking for a husband. And you've got to use curlers to look your best."
Irene, I think I want to point out right away that, of course, this was pre-heated rollers, and you were wearing things sort of like this. And,
That's right, yeah.
they were rather revolting and extremely uncomfortable. Why on earth did you wear them?
Well, to look glamorous at night when we went out.
So, yes, I understand that, but why wear them at work?
Well, it gave them time to work.
Oh, they took that long, did they?
Yeah, we used to put them in our dinner hour, you see, and by the time we went out at night, looking smashing.
And why...
Well, that's our opinion.
Yes. Why were there objections about you wearing these rollers?
Why did he object? He said they were unhygienic and they give us headaches.
Mm.
But we never got a headache, did we?
So the moment you saw a lady with rollers in at work, you knew that she was going out that night?
9 out of 10 girls wore rollers in those days. You could go in town and see every other girl in rollers.
Oh, it didn't mean she was going out that night. She was just showing off.
Probably not, but we always were.
Well, of course, yes. Do you ever wear them now?
Oh, no.
Very occasionally.
Why not?
You've got to make the effort now. It means they look worse when you've got lines.
Right. Well, as you said, you went through the torture of wearing these things so that you could go out on a date. Do you remember any of the dances that were around?
Oh, yes. Twist.
Locomotion.
Turkey Trot.
Very good. Very, very good.
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
Indeed, they're quite right.
12 ways of doing the twist. It belongs, they said, to the jungle. Too abandoned, too inhibited. Frankly, too damn sexy for the British. That was 2.5 years ago. Now even the Queen twists. And dancers are going wild with dozens of variations.
And it seemed that every time a pop record came out, there was a dance to accompany it. There was an amazing list, including Locomotion, Mashed Potato, the Hully Gully, Hippie Hippie Shake, and the Turkey Trot. It must have been incredibly confusing. And I wonder if life in the dance hall in 1963 looked like this. Did you ever do that sort of dance?
You know, funny enough, I've never danced in my life. And I I'm glad I didn't after watching some of those. I tell you, we must have been nuts in those days, to do some of those things. No, but it was great. I mean, the 60s, it was such an exciting time, you know, with the music and all the new dances coming out. It was terrific.
Yes. Well, of course, you got on the stage quite early. We got a lovely photograph of you, I think at the age of about 14 months there. Not quite sure whether you got nappy trouble or whether you were trying to kick the ball there. Family life, back home, how much were you encouraged to be a sportsman?
Very much so. My mother was a very, very good hockey player, field hockey. My father played amateur football, and from what I gather, a few of his pals tell me he used to kick a little bit. So, so there was that sporting side of it. And my father was always at me to kick with both feet and, you know, practice and practice.
Well, we got him here to tell you off. Your father, Dick Best. Did you spot that he was a natural footballer? Did you ever look at him and think, crumbs, he's something special?
Yeah, well, I did think he had a lot of ability. In fact, most of my neighbours saw more of it than I did, actually. And I think the little thing that struck me was that he was so late, that maybe he was a little bit too late. Although I knew he was a wary type and strong for the size.
He was quite frail, really, wasn't
he? Yeah, he was late. I wouldn't say he was frail, he was late, but sort of wary, you know.
Seen more fat than a chip.
Well, I use the word frail because that used to worry you in those early days, wasn't it?
Oh, when I was a kid, you know, at school, all the girls used to make fun of me because I was so skinny, and it really got to me. You know, it became a thing with me. You know, I think I was the only kid in the school when it came to do PT classes or any sort of physical education. I wanted to keep my vest on all the time because I was so embarrassed about my. And of course, that made it worse. The more I did things like that, the more the girls took the mick out of me. Yeah. And it was always something that, because I know people that started to watch me, some scouts that started to watch me, and nothing seemed to come of it. And I always thought, you know, I was paranoid, but I thought it was because I was so skinny, and I was never going to put on weight.
But of course, one man did spot you, Bob Bishop.
Right, yeah, I mean, obviously I didn't know, but apparently Bob Bishop, who was Manchester United's chief scout in Northern Ireland, had been watching me. And actually, I think they arranged a special match where he watched me. And came to see the family one day and asked if I'd be interested in going.
Do you remember that time when he came and called?
He came along with another lad from the Craig Boys Club where George played. And they said, would you be interested in letting George go to Manchester United? I thought, well, I mean, who wouldn't be? I said, well, if he wants to go, he goes of his own accord. So we called him off the street, actually. And I said, this man wants to go to Manchester United. I think he didn't believe it, by the way. But then they got it sorted out, and off he went, done very well.
Yes, he did do quite well, didn't he? And his early talents were spotted by a gentleman very famous in the game, Sir Matt Busby.
He's the best player to come into football for a very long time. Not only that, he's a fantastic, he's got a tremendous temperament. He's away from his ability, and I've never seen a player that can beat players so close.
George, this is a surprise to see me here, and it's an occasion which I always recall. You're starting with Manchester United, and the way you started and the problems we had at that particular time. Our head scout in Northern Ireland at that time was Bob Bishop, and I believe he's still our scout here still. And he had been sort of recommending a little player, but more of an elf, because he was so small and so light and light-footed anyway. And of course I come away and I felt, well, this is a boy we must get interested in, despite his size at the time. I'm afraid a week after it, the bad news came that George had decided, I'm homesick, I want to go home. So I said, well, there's nothing much more I can do, except, George, if you change your mind, do get in touch with me. Because I was very impressed with the skills that he showed. There was natural ability. Well, it went about 10 days, and of course I got a call from Dick, his father, Dick Best, his father, to say that George had changed his mind and would like to come back and have a second go. And from there, that was the start of the great Best, one of the all-time greats, I'm sure he will live in some of the things he's done on the field. The natural ability he had will be something I will keep in my mind all the days of my life.
Dick, listening to that tribute from Sir Matt, has any of his antics since sort of irritated you as a father?
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah.
Did you ever tell him?
I tried to.
Yeah.
I used to think he didn't listen, but I think he did, really. At times.
Yes, and I love the idea that you got this great opportunity of going to Manchester United and probably came back within 48 hours, along with this young gentleman, Eric McMordy.
We were both very, very homesick. You know, as I said, never been away, and we talked to each other and decided between us that we'd had enough after 24 hours.
Well, of course, you conquered the homesickness. He didn't. He stayed in Northern Ireland, but he's here now.
Oh, no.
Enter Eric McMordy. Do you feel that was an opportunity missed?
Yes, definitely. I think I would regret what I did always in life.
Yeah.
Basically because I felt obviously envious of George and what he's achieved in life, but basically he had the opportunity of playing with so many good players who already you've seen just a few this evening. So I think always I will regret not stopping at Manchester. But it was the most awful experience, quite honestly. It really was frightening.
Well, we're making it sound as if you haven't achieved anything, which is far from the truth, because you play for Middlesbrough.
Yes.
And you both played together for Northern Ireland.
That's correct.
What's he like to play with?
Terrible. No, quite serious.
He means that because he doesn't get a kick when I play with him.
That's something I wanted to ask. Is he a
truthful.
Selfish player? Did you ever think, oh, for goodness sake?
Of course we did. Yeah, but the unfortunate thing was that what George would take on, he usually achieved, so you couldn't give him a good rollicking. Where other players would break down, and obviously they got the verbal abuse of fellow professionals.
Yeah. What are you doing now, Eric?
Basically now we're involved in, we've got a business in Middlesbrough. I do a bit building for myself. I've got a general dealer's grocery shop. As little as possible, quite honestly.
Well, thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
I mentioned earlier your association with the pop world. I mean, you were called El Beatle by one newspaper. Did you ever meet the Beatles?
Yeah, I know Ringo reasonably well.
Well, while you were having the time of your life in May 1963, the Beatles were in fact at #1 in the charts.
You by my side, I got lips that long to kiss you, I keep you satisfied, that you are. If there's anything I can do, yes, just call on me, and I'll send it a love, with love from me to you, to you, to you, to you.
The Beatles at #1, of course. Let's have a look at the pop chart for May of 1963. We see that Andy Williams had a hit. In Dreams was Roy Orbison, Ed Miller was up there. And at #2, deposed by the Beatles, How Do You Do It, Gerry and the Pacemakers. And here is Gerry in his native Liverpool, down at the dockside.
How do you do what you do to me? I wish I knew. If I knew how you do it to me, I'd do it to you. How do you do what you do to me? I'm feeling blue. I wish I knew how you do it to me, but I haven't a clue. You give me a feeling in my heart, like an arrow passing through it. Suppose that you think you're very smart, but won't you tell me how do you do it? How do you do what you do to me? If I only knew, then perhaps you'd fall for me like I fell for you. How do you do what you do to me? If I only knew, then perhaps you'd fall for me like I fell for you. when I do it to you.
If I can take you back to the early days of the 60s, there was a point where you were actually more popular than the Beatles.
Yes, one Friday in June. I think that was the only time we were more popular.
But you did top them in various polls.
Yes, we had a Mersey poll and we topped them a couple of times. That was before people realised how good the Beatles were and how bad we were.
What have you been doing since those days?
Mainly touring. I did 5 years in the West End. I did Charlie Girl with Dame Anne and Eagle and Derek Nimmo. Then I did Full Both Ends, and then I reformed a band about 74, and we've been on the road since, touring the States, Australia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Saudi Arabia, everywhere, and Barnsley. It's lovely.
Now, of course, this programme is all about football.
Yes.
And you came up with an anthem, in many respects.
Yes.
You'll Never Walk Alone. What's the story behind that?
Well, I saw the musical, the film of Carousel, and I saw in the film, he sang Walk Alone. It was really nice, so I went back to the band and I said, I'd like to put this in the act. And then after 6 weeks of playing it in the Cop, the Cop started to sing it, or the football crowd. And from then on, it just went on from there, and it's lovely. It's a nice feeling. It's like having a #1 record every Saturday.
Indeed. Have you ever been at a football ground when it's been sung?
Oh, certainly, yeah. I'm a bit annoyed because they sing it better than I do, and it really annoys me. But I still get goose pimples when I stand there and they all start singing it. It's really nice.
Even though we got Mr. Best on the programme, presumably you're an Anfield man, are you?
Yes, certainly. I think George is great, actually. I've always admired George's playing, especially when he started. A few more years, he could be like Kenny Dalglish, God bless him. Just a bit more practice, George, you'd be all right. But he was a great footballer, George. Loved him. Lovely lad.
Gerry, thank you very much.
No, it's nice to see you. God bless. Thank you.
Thanks. A really terrific chap. There was also somebody making the pace in May 1963.
Linda, the cup winner. Boys' team had an ace up their sleeve, a girl centre forward. The school football team from Newmarket, West Suffolk, smashed their way through to the cup final, and with 2 great goals from their fleet-footed centre forward, won the title. She is 11-year-old Linda Fitzpatrick. Tomboy Linda said yesterday, I love football and always join the boys' games in break time.
What first got you involved as a little girl footballer?
Well, I think I was rather a tomboy. I used to go over the park and play with all the boys, and they got their own team up and asked me to join in because they saw that I could play. And it went on from there with the scouts and then at school, primary school. I just carried on playing at school, really.
Were they kind to you, or were they typical little boys and kicked you all over the place?
Well, I think they're all right, really. They just treated me really like a boy. You know, they went in with the shots, you know, and the kicks, and I got my fair size of bruises. It was really good.
And obviously you're very keen on continuing the line. What point did you get involved, Lisa?
Just playing at school with
Really?
the boys.
Do you have a hero? Do you have a footballer you particularly admire?
No, not really.
And what about you when you were playing at the age of 12 or whatever? I mean, did you have a hero in those days?
Yes, I did. Jimmy Greaves.
Jimmy Greaves?
Yeah, the family,
We have
really.
something in common. He was my hero as well.
He was?
Greaves, yeah, tremendous. Yeah. Great player.
And what do you feel about ladies being involved in the sport?
Funny enough, I've been living in America sort of for the last 7 years, really. And there it is normal for the young girls to play along with the boys. I mean, I'm all for, mixing of any sports, I think as long as they're out there running around enjoying themselves kicking the ball, it's a lot better than a lot of the other things they could be up to.
Right. We've got a special little present for you. A football, which has been signed by all the footballers, including, of course, George, who have come on the programme. And one non-footballer, I've signed it as well. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Good luck with your career, and good luck with all the sports that you get involved in. George, we mentioned earlier a tremendous disaster. I mean, the terror of Munich lived on within Manchester United for a very long time. How aware were you when you were joining the club in 1963 of this sort of gloom hanging over?
Well, I mean, as you said, it really was a terrible disaster because it's one of those things. Of course, the Kennedy assassination was in '63, and I remember what I was doing, and the Munich air crash was the same sort of thing. It was one of those terrible days in history that almost everyone remembers what they were doing, And of course, you know, it almost completely wiped out an unbelievably great side, great talented side.
Well, this is the way in which the news people covered the story of the Munich air crash.
Munich Airport, and wreckage that tells the story of the dreadful disaster. Here's the story from two of the survivors, their goalie, Harry Gregg.
Well, I was lucky I got out because my safety belt was broke and I got out on my hands and knees. Just as I got to the outside of the plane, I seen a few of the boys hanging about, Peter here, and I called him to come back. I heard the kiddie crying, it brought me to senses. I lifted the kiddie out and handed it to Peter. He took it away.
Harry Gregg. I don't want to dwell on it too much because it's not part of what we're talking about in 1963, but how much has the Munich thing hung over you?
Well, it's bound to have made a certain mark on my life, but thank God I lived through it.
Yes.
I was able to survive it and help other people. It was a tragic time for the country, a tragic time for the club, and a tragic time for journalists, because Britain at that time lost not only the great players, a great team, but they lost great journalists, which has been inclined to be forgotten over 40 years.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to 1963, where you had every right, actually, to be a bit fed up, because you got dropped from that cup final team, didn't you?
I believe over a period of about a month before that cup final, the boss, better known as Sir Matt, spent time hiding behind trees. That's how fed up I was. Yes, I was very upset at being out in the final.
Did this mean that you were maybe a little bit more aware of this young gentleman's arrival on the scene?
I had been aware of George prior to the cup final because one of my few injuries, after it, I went to train with the young boys at the cliff. And in those days, I didn't like to be beaten and was inclined to chase people who beat me and try and beat them physically. And this kid came up to me, and in those days, I had thought that I could throw dummies and make the guy give me the ball. And this young kid did it to me the first time, and I thought it's a mistake. They don't do that to Greg. And he did it again. I'm very serious. It wasn't a mistake. It was the beginning of George Best. And after a period of time, I spoke with the boss, and I said, have you seen the young kid from Belfast? He said, yes. The one with the blue eyes and the short hair. And he said, it's a pity he's so small. That was the first notice I had of George.
Mm. And what about the other way around? What was it like to play with the great Harry Gregg?
Well, I mean, Harry is, I mean, apart from the Munich air crash, is a big hero to a lot of people in Northern Ireland. They're very, very proud of him, as I am, coming from Northern Ireland. I mean, I'd be proud of him whether I came from Northern Ireland or not, but it just helps to the fact that he, you know, he was the Northern Ireland goalkeeper. I've tremendous admiration for Harry. I think the world of him.
Let's have a look at some of the skills that Harry spotted so early on at the training ground.
Down with the free kick. Up goes Best, he scored! Manchester United. Here comes Best again. What a player this boy is, he's got another! And Manchester United going to get number 6, it's Best. No calling for it on the right. With that cheekiest of all cheeky little flicks by this supreme cheeky chappie, George Best.
Harry, you just said that last bit was absolutely brilliant. It seems to me, looking at that, and I don't think you're going to be the greatest soccer pundit in the world, the game is different now. You couldn't have a George Best in 1984.
They don't play football today. They play a game called soccer, which is a completely different game. There's times I look at the game today and I think they're playing for throw-ins because they play across the pitch a lot of the teams I see. When we played a game called football, where there were hammer throwers at centre half, people that kicked you. When tackling was allowed in the likes of George Best from the neck down. Those things were part of our game, where the old adage, if he puts his head down, don't disappoint him. Really and truly, that was part of the thing that the public came to see. But the last clip that it showed where George went through once, and he went from the 18-yard line past about 4 players, and he got himself in position almost in the byline, where a stupid player would shoot from a stupid angle. And George decided, you don't score from the byline, So he actually dribbled the ball back through where he'd come from and back heel to a fellow in a better position. Players are coached today to the point where they're looking for intelligent players to understand systems. Now, there's a big difference.
I agree with Harry there. If kids do that today, you see, at the end of that, I lost the ball really because it didn't go to where I expected it to go. But if I'd have been today, someone would have clipped me across the ear for that, for losing the ball and for holding on to it too long. In those days, no one told me off because they knew that eventually through my own teammates screaming at me and through experience I'd learn. And I think, unfortunately, kids today are a little bit afraid to try things like that and do things that are a little bit different. I happen to believe it'll come back. You know, I hope it does because there just aren't any individuals left.
Will it come back, Harry? Will we see George Bests in the 1990s?
I pray to God it will.
Ladies and gentlemen, Harry Gregg. Thank you, Harry. Well, the time of your life was May 1963, but my word, you've been doing a lot of other things with your life since then. I mean, you've hardly ever been out of the news. We've got some of the news headlines that you've been making.
Best and girl in riddle of punch-up. George Best clobbered. I quit by George Best. Why I'm a bloody wreck. For the last year, all I have done is drink.
Very honest comment, that. Jimmy Greaves has been very honest about his alcohol problems. Were yours as severe as his?
Well, yeah, I would think so. I went through a terrible time. I mean, I said a year on that thing. I mean, it was a lot longer than a year. I'm lucky in a way. You know, I realised before it was too late what I was doing to myself. I just couldn't handle all the press and the publicity and the things that went with it. And I tried to hide through alcohol, and it just doesn't work. You know, and I got to a stage where I used to think that I couldn't do anything. You know, for instance, if someone had said to me, I'm going to sit and talk to you, I'd go and have a drink, you know, because I thought I could talk more sense, or I looked better, or I acted better. And it got to a stage where I thought I couldn't do anything unless I'd had a couple of drinks, which is obviously, I mean, the biggest load of rubbish ever.
Do you find that you've got regrets now?
No, that's the nice thing about the whole period of my life. I don't regret any of it. Even the bad times, because I'm glad I've had to see it, the waking up, so to speak. I'm happy the way I've ended up. I have a beautiful son, you know, obviously I think the world of. I retain my health. I'm very, very busy at the moment. I'm doing a tremendous amount of coaching and travelling all over the world playing exhibition games. And it's nice, I'm my own boss. I haven't had a drink for almost a year. And the longer it goes, the less I feel like it. And so I tend to look at myself as how I've ended up. I could have been a hell of a lot worse off. And I was fortunate because, I mean, first of all, the year that we're talking about, I had 10 great years. And I just feel fortunate I was around at that time.
Are you ever aware of the amount that people are frustrated by the fact that somehow they almost feel a bit cheated about you, that you never realised the full potential? I mean, when I said to various friends, oh, we're going to do a show with George Best, to a man, they all said, oh, if only.
Yeah.
There's a tremendous, I mean, your next book ought to be almost if only.
Yeah. It's true, actually. My friends say the same to me. You know, as not only as friends, but I suppose as football fans. They say the same thing, you know, we only had 11 years, you know, and it should have been maybe almost twice that. But it wasn't to be, you know, and I can understand their point of view, because I'm the same when I see great players getting towards the end. I mean, I shortened it, you know, myself through various reasons, but I feel cheated when I see players like Jimmy Greaves and, say, Jim Baxter and players like that having to quit, because I admire them tremendously and I want to see them go on forever. But it's just not to be, and I feel sorry for them, you're right. I mean, my friends, when they say to me it should have gone on forever, I wish it had done, but you know, it didn't. And as I say, I tend to look at myself. I'm happy with the way I've ended up.
Good. Thank you for the memories. Thank you for the honesty. Ladies and gentlemen, George Best.